Guadalcanal, October 1943. The jungle pressed in, a suffocating green wall around the raw, exposed nerves of Henderson Field. The constant thrum of distant artillery was a visceral pulse, a sound that burrowed deep into the bones, a ceaseless reminder of the brutal war. Across the scarred, coral dust runway, a mangled F4U Corsair, tail number 117, clawed its way to a violent, sickening halt. It didn't land so much as it collided with the earth, spewing a choking cloud of dust and hydraulic fluid as it skidded. Its right wing, what remained of it, was a grotesque, shredded mess of twisted aluminum and torn fabric, pockmarked with bullet holes that gaped like empty eyes. The engine, having bravely carried its burden this far, gave a final, desperate cough, a mournful, metallic groan, then died, leaving an eerie silence punctuated only by the crackle of cooling metal and the frantic shouts of the ground crew. The scene that emerged from the dissipating dust was one of grim finality. A once proud bird, now a broken heap. Frantic, desperate hands clawed at the canopy, pulling it open. They extricated a figure, dazed and bloodied, from the wreckage. Lieutenant Jack Lucky Morrison, his flight suit torn. A smear of crimson across his cheek blinked against the blinding tropical sun. His eyes, though wide with shock, held a flicker of something defiant, a refusal to completely succumb to the exhaustion and terror he must have endured. His face, etched with the raw aftermath of an impossible survival, spoke volumes without a single word. Amidst the chaos, Petty Officer First Class Tony Wrench Castellano, a man whose hands were perpetually stained with the indelible mark of his trade, a burly mechanic from the unforgiving streets of Brooklyn, watched. His gaze was practiced, assessing, yet held a spark of something beyond mere technical evaluation. He saw not simply a wrecked aircraft, but the ghost of a proud, winged warrior. In the heart of the Pacific Inferno, where men and machines were sacrificed daily, they said this plane was dead, a mangled corpse of steel and fire. But for one mechanic, it was just waiting for a second chance to fly. And in doing so, it would carry a hero back to the sky. Have you ever seen something so broken, so utterly destroyed, that you believed it held a secret, a lingering spark of life? What stories do these forgotten relics hide? Stick around, because this isn't just about a plane. It's about the unbreakable spirit forged in the crucible of war. Far to the north, beyond the steaming emerald tangle of the Solomon Islands, nestled within the heavily fortified perimeter of Rabaul, Captain Kaito Tanaka gazed at the horizon. The Ghost of Rabaul, they called him, a chilling moniker that echoed through the Allied briefing rooms. He was a highly decorated Imperial Japanese Navy ace, his kill count a grim tally of Allied air superiority ambitions, and a source of quiet dread amongst the young, fresh-faced American pilots. He flew a customized A6M0, its sleek, deadly lines a blur of polished metal as it cut through the cerulean sky. The precise, almost clinical roar of its engine was a familiar sound, a constant, low-frequency hum of menace that vibrated through the air around Rabaul, a signal of his predatory presence. Tanaka embodied the unwavering spirit of Bushido, a doctrine of honor, discipline, and absolute self-sacrifice that permeated every fiber of his being. He believed in the inherent superiority of Japanese engineering, and, more profoundly, of Japanese pilot skill. He viewed American planes as crude, mass-produced tools, easily dispatched, lacking the soul and artistry of the Zeeks, the Zeros, which he considered extensions of their pilots' spirits. His doctrine was one of swift, decisive aerial dominance, designed not just to win battles, but to shatter the very morale of his enemy. The distant, almost imperceptible hum on his radio confirmed another successful interception, another downed Corsair. He dismissed the Allied pilots as lacking the necessary spirit, their machines as merely disposable hardware. The glint of sunlight off his Zero's meticulously polished canopy reflected a cold, calculating resolve. Tanaka studied intelligence reports with a quiet confidence, noting the steadily dwindling number of operational Allied fighters. It was merely a matter of time. The moments immediately after Morrison's Corsair ground to a halt were a blur of coordinated chaos. Medics rushed, their white uniforms stark against the red earth. Fire crews stood by with hoses at the ready, while the acrid metallic smell of burning fuel and cordite hung heavy, stinging the nostrils. Morrison, disoriented but miraculously alive, was carefully extricated from the mangled cockpit. His uniform was torn, blood matted in his hair, a deep, jagged gash above his eye. But his first words, raspy and strained, weren't for a medic or a stretcher. "My plane," he insisted, pushing away a guiding hand. "I need to see her." He stumbled towards the wreck, ignoring the pain, his gaze fixed on the twisted fuselage that had saved his life. He saw 117, his partner in countless battles, the very machine that had brought him through impossible odds. Now a broken, ignominious heap. A single tear, gritty with dust, traced a path through the grime on his face, a silent acknowledgement of profound loss. "She's done," he whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. "She's really done." A grizzled chief warrant officer, his face lined with the weariness of too many lost battles and too many lost planes, shook his head. "Sorry, Lieutenant. She's a write-off. Beyond saving." The mechanics around him, hardened by months of patching up and sending off aircraft, knowing many would never return, nodded grimly. They had seen too many like this. They understood. But Tony Castellano, standing a little apart from the others, his hands already ingrained with the grease of 100 other repairs, didn't nod. He meticulously surveyed the damage, his eyes scanning every rivet, every twisted strut, every shattered piece of metal. He saw the collective despair, the resignation, but also a flicker of something else, a refusal to accept the finality. The official report, scrawled on a crumpled field form, was swift and brutal. F4U Corsair, tail number 117. Declared 100% loss. Structural integrity compromised. Engine seized. Wings beyond repair. Estimated scrap value only. Salvage deemed impractical. The paper, stamped total loss, fluttered from an officer's hand, landing in a puddle of oil, a symbol of its utter condemnation. Tony walked away from the wreckage, the official verdict echoing in his ears. But something gnawed at him. It was a feeling he couldn't shake, a stubborn refusal to let go. Late that night, under the harsh, stark glow of floodlights that cut stark shadows across the airfield, he returned to the wreck. The jungle insects hummed a ceaseless, humid symphony. He reached out, his calloused fingers tracing the scorched fuselage, feeling the cold, unforgiving steel. A silent promise began to form in his mind, a defiant whisper against the cacophony of official pronouncements. "I'll fix you." He saw the Corsair not as a mere machine, but as Morrison's guardian angel, battered and broken, yes, but deserving of a chance at resurrection. He began a detailed, almost forensic assessment. The engine compartment, a tangled mess of wiring and ruptured components, was 70% destroyed. The right wing, torn and riddled, was 85% disintegrated. Hydraulics, severed. Landing gear, shattered. The sheer scale of the damage was daunting, a challenge that would demand potentially 500+ man-hours, far beyond what could ever be justified for a total loss. Yet Tony felt a surge of resolve. He began to sketch out a plan, his grease-stained hands moving with purpose. His strategy was audacious, born of desperate necessity. He would cannibalize parts from 3 other derelict Corsairs, each a tragic story of its own. Lucky's Ghost, Devil Dog, and Pacific Rattler, planes that had met their own brutal ends in the endless skirmishes over the Solomons. These were planes other mechanics had long abandoned, picked clean for their last usable pieces, but Tony saw potential in their forgotten remains. He knew he would face resistance. His immediate superior, Master Sergeant Mac McMillan, a grizzled, cynical but deeply caring leader, approached him as Tony worked under the solitary beam of a flashlight. "Castellano, are you out of your mind?" Mac's voice was a low growl, but held a hint of concern. "We ain't got the parts, the time, or the manpower for a miracle. Focus on the flyable ones." Other mechanics, catching wind of Tony's mad endeavor, openly scoffed, muttering about Tony's folly. But Mac, observing the unwavering determination in Tony's eyes, a fire that wouldn't be extinguished, eventually gave a reluctant, unofficial nod. "Just don't tell command, and don't expect any help," he conceded. the words a weary acceptance of Tony's stubbornness. Tony, alone in the vast, echoing hangar, carefully unrolled a secretly obtained copy of the Corsair's original schematics. He pored over them, the intricate lines and numbers blurring under the weak beam of his flashlight, searching for weaknesses, for strengths, for forgotten details. He found a faded memo from Grumman engineers, tucked away in the obscure corners of the blueprint, discussing minor structural flex in early models, a detail that sparked an idea for a more robust reinforcement, something beyond standard. Tony's scavenging became a legend in itself. He braved the mosquito-infested jungles, the suffocating heat, crawling through forgotten crash sites where the wreckage lay half-swallowed by the relentless vegetation. He pulled usable parts from derelict planes, battling rust and decay. He traded favors, sharing his precious coffee rations and hard-won cigarettes with other ground crews for specific tools or the exact rivet size he needed. He even bartered with Australian engineers for specialized cutting bits, his ingenuity growing with every obstacle. He adapted with astonishing resourcefulness, using Japanese zero aluminum plating for non-critical repairs where Corsair parts were simply unavailable, subtly modifying their dimensions to fit. He even fashioned bespoke fittings using a makeshift lathe improvised from a Jeep engine and some scrap metal, a testament to his boundless creativity under pressure. He painstakingly replaced over 300 rivets on the fuselage alone, each one hammered with precision, a small act of defiance against the war's destructive power. The hydraulic lines, a complex network of tubes and valves, were rebuilt almost entirely from scratch, using salvaged hoses and ingenious splicing techniques that made official manuals seem quaint. But his masterpiece was the right wing. He reinvented it, structurally reinforcing it beyond factory specifications, adding internal bracing and thicker skin panels where the original had been flimsy. "This wing won't buckle again," he muttered to himself, his brow furrowed in concentration as he hammered the final rivet, securing a patch of salvaged metal from a downed P-38. Each repair was a small, quiet victory, a silent testament to his will to resurrect the machine. One humid afternoon, as he meticulously cleaned the cockpit, a faded photograph fluttered from a hidden compartment. It was a picture of Morrison's wife, a faint smile on her face, tucked into the side panel of the wrecked 117. It reinforced his resolve, cementing the deeper purpose of his work. This wasn't just for Morrison, but for those waiting for him back home, for the future they hoped to reclaim. He also found a small, personal log entry by Morrison, tucked beneath the pilot's seat. It simply read, 117, the only thing keeping me alive up there. Tony carefully pinned it above his workbench, a constant, silent reminder of the stakes. Rumors began to spread through the hospital wards. Whispers of the crazy Brooklyn mechanic trying to fix a ghost plane circulated, a mix of disbelief and fascination. Morrison, recovering from shrapnel wounds and the profound exhaustion of battle, initially dismissed it as a cruel, morbid joke. But as the whispers persisted, gaining detail and conviction, a fragile spark of hope ignited within him. He started asking about Tony and 117 with increasing frequency, clinging to the possibility, however remote, of a reunion with his plane. He couldn't quite believe it, but a part of him desperately wanted it to be true. The ultimate challenge remained, the Pratt & Whitney R2800 engine, a beast of an engine, capable of immense power, but equally complex and demanding. Tony meticulously disassembled it, every component laid out on tarps like surgical instruments. He cleaned each part, identifying salvageable pieces from multiple dead engines, carefully separating the good from the irredeemably broken. He faced a critical shortage. A specific carburetor part, crucial for fuel mixture, was nowhere to be found. Depot stock was depleted, supply lines stretched thin. In a moment of desperation, his eyes scanning the various piles of Allied and Japanese scrap, he spotted a component from a captured Zero engine. Its dimensions were wrong, its function different, but the metallurgy was similar, and its basic shape offered a glimmer of possibility. With sheer ingenuity, he fabricated a new part, adapting the Japanese component, grinding, filing, and shaping it until it fit with uncanny precision, a hybrid heart for the reborn engine. The rebuilt R-2800, now a patchwork of Allied and enemy components, a testament to pure grit, was finally mounted back into the Phoenix's fuselage. Tony spent days, then nights, tuning it, adjusting fuel lines, meticulously gapping spark plugs, calibrating manifold pressures. His aim was audacious, an unprecedented 2,500 horsepower, pushing beyond factory specifications through his unconventional modifications. He adjusted the supercharger impeller, hoping to squeeze out every last ounce of thrust. "She'll scream like a banshee now," he boasted to Mac, his voice hoarse with fatigue but bright with pride. Mac, usually stoic, simply shook his head, a rare, grudging admiration in his eyes. He knew what Tony had achieved was nothing short of miraculous. Tony also discovered, embedded deep within a faded maintenance log for 117 from a previous base, a cryptic entry detailing a persistent minor engine stumble at high altitude. He used this historical data, combined with his own modifications, to fine-tune his custom carburetor, resolving the old flaw while enhancing overall performance. The day of the engine test, every mechanic, every pilot, every ground crew member within earshot gathered. A mixture of skepticism and anticipation etched on their faces. The humid air crackled with unspoken tension. Tony, his face streaked with grease and sweat, climbed into the cockpit. He ran through the pre-start checklist, his movements practiced, precise. He engaged the starter. The engine coughed, a tentative splutter, then another, more robust. Then with a roar that ripped through the very fabric of the jungle air, it caught. The sound was deep, guttural, a primal scream of defiance that vibrated through the ground, shaking the entire hangar. It was a sound of life reborn, of metal defying its intended fate. Morrison, still limping but now discharged from the infirmary, heard it from his barracks, a wave of profound relief washing over him. He knew instinctively that 117 was back. He knew that sound. The ground crew erupted in cheers, their skepticism replaced by awe slapping Tony on the back, a cacophony of joyful shouts. Someone, caught up in the sheer impossibility of the moment, shouted, "She's a Phoenix!" The name stuck, echoing through the makeshift repair shop, a powerful new identity for a plane that had refused to die. Intelligence reports, grim and chilling, confirmed a terrifying development. Captain Kaito Tanaka, the ghost of Rabal and his elite squadron, had been specifically assigned to systematically dismantle Allied air power over Guadalcanal. Their tactics were ruthless, designed with surgical precision, targeting Allied supply lines and airfields to maximize psychological impact. Allied morale, already fragile from relentless combat, began to crack under this renewed assault. The need for every single operational fighter, especially one with the firepower and resilience of a Corsair, became desperately, urgently clear. Command, in a rare moment of concession to desperate reality, issued a new directive. All available aircraft, regardless of previous damage assessment, must be pressed into service if deemed even remotely airworthy. This directive, which just weeks before would have been met with exasperated sighs, now, incredibly, legitimized Tony's folly. The whispers about Phoenix suddenly gained official credence. Morrison, witnessing the increasing losses of his squadron mates and hearing the chilling tales of Tanaka's reign of terror, felt an overwhelming sense of guilt and helplessness. He had believed his flying days in 117 were definitively over, that his partner was lost forever. But seeing the Phoenix reborn, hearing its powerful, defiant roar, and comprehending the sheer impossible effort Tony had poured into its resurrection, a profound realization dawned on him. Tony hadn't simply fixed a plane, he had restored hope. He had given Morrison a second chance, a potent symbol of defiance against overwhelming odds. This realization transformed Morrison's recovery from a purely physical healing into a mental and spiritual rededication. He wasn't just flying a plane anymore. He was carrying the hopes, the tireless efforts, and the impossible dream of an entire ground crew and one stubborn mechanic into the very heart of the sky. The bond between pilot and mechanic, forged in grease and determination, became something almost sacred, a silent, unbreakable pact. The day of Morrison's return to combat was steeped in a nervous energy that hummed across Henderson Field. The phoenix, freshly painted with a crude but powerful phoenix rising from flames emblem, a masterpiece of amateur artistry painstakingly rendered by Tony himself, sat prominently on the tarmac. Its newly polished surfaces glinted in the tropical sun, a testament to endless hours of meticulous labor. Tony stood beside the cockpit, his face a mixture of pride and apprehension. Morrison, fully recovered, his limp barely perceptible, walked towards him. Their handshake was firm, silent, conveying a profound unspoken understanding. Tony's final words, delivered with a quiet intensity, were simple yet profound. "She's more than ready, Lieutenant. She's waiting for you." Then, the alarms screamed. A massive Japanese air raid, a terrifying swarm of Zeros and dive bombers, bore down on Henderson Field. Captain Kaito Tanaka, unmistakable in his customized Zero, led the assault, his objective clear: to cripple the Allied airbase. Morrison, already strapped into the Phoenix, was scrambled alongside his squadron. The stakes were immense. If the field fell, the entire Guadalcanal campaign, and with it, countless lives, would be jeopardized. From Morrison's cockpit, the world became a blur of combat. The scream of the Phoenix's engine, a guttural, savage roar, filled his ears, a symphony of power. The enhanced maneuverability of his Corsair was immediately evident. He pulled tighter turns, executed sharper rolls, outmaneuvering Zeros that he knew he could never have matched in a standard F4U. The custom exhaust deflector, Tony's small but crucial modification, proved its worth in a critical moment. As a pursuing Zero clung to his tail, Morrison executed a sudden, violent brake, the deflected exhaust gases momentarily blinding his attacker, giving him the precious seconds he needed to gain the advantage. He found himself face to face with Tanaka's Zero, the distinct red circle on its wings a chilling target. Their personal duel became a deadly ballet in the sky, a dance of death played out against the backdrop of an aerial war. The Phoenix felt alive, an extension of his will, a silent partner in his quest for survival and, perhaps, vengeance. Every movement, every twitch of the stick was met with an immediate, precise response, a seamless extension of his thought. On the ground, Tony and Max stood on the perimeter, binoculars glued to the churning, chaotic ballet above. They tracked the Phoenix's every move, their faces etched with anxiety, listening to the crackle of radio chatter, trying to decipher the ebb and flow of battle. Tony instinctively knew what every shudder, every sharp turn, every sudden dive meant for his plane, his mechanical intuition translating the visual into visceral understanding. He muttered encouragements under his breath, as if the plane itself could hear him, willing it to perform, to survive. Mac, usually stoic, his face a mask of hardened indifference, found himself clenching his fists, a rare display of raw emotion. The roar of the Phoenix's engine, distinct and powerful, was a beacon of defiance amidst the cacophony of battle, a sound Tony could pick out from 100 others. In his Zero, Tanaka, initially confident in his superior skill and machine, grew increasingly frustrated, then shocked. This Corsair, 117, the very one he had personally shot down weeks ago, flew with impossible agility. It absorbed hits that should have torn it apart, and executed maneuvers that defied the known capabilities of any F4U. "Nani?" he exclaimed, his voice tight with disbelief as Morrison pulled a tight, aggressive turn that his own vaunted Zero could barely match, a turn that should have ripped the wings off any American plane. He sensed something profoundly different about this aircraft, almost a spiritual defiance, a living entity that shattered his deeply held belief in American expendability. This was not just a machine. It was an insult to his doctrine, a direct challenge to his absolute superiority. After a brutal, extended dogfight that stretched the limits of man and machine, Morrison, leveraging the Phoenix's enhanced performance and his own hardened skill, outmaneuvered Tanaka. A precise burst of .50 caliber machine gun fire ripped through Tanaka's Zero, shredding its control surfaces, puncturing its fuel tank. It spewed a plume of black smoke, then burst into flames, spiraling wildly, inexorably, towards the shimmering blue surface of the Pacific. Morrison watched it fall, a mixture of triumph and weariness washing over him. The immediate Japanese attack, leaderless and demoralized by Tanaka's unexpected demise, faltered and broke, scattering back towards Rabaul. Morrison landed the Phoenix, battered but largely intact, to a roaring, cheering ground crew. The noise was deafening, a cacophony of relief and celebration. He jumped out of the cockpit, his legs stiff, but his stride purposeful. He walked directly to Tony, who stood by, his face streaked with tears and grease, and clapped him on the shoulder. Their handshake was a silent pact, a profound acknowledgement of gratitude and shared triumph. "You gave me back my wings, Tony," Morrison said, his voice husky with emotion. "You gave her back her soul." The Japanese air raid was decisively repelled, a critical turning point. Tanaka's loss was a massive, irreparable blow to their morale and air superiority in the sector. The Phoenix became an immediate legend among the squadrons, its story whispered with awe and reverence. Pilots clamored to have Tony work on their planes, hoping for a touch of his magic. His reputation and the myth of the Phoenix spread like wildfire across the Pacific theater. The Phoenix continued to fly for the remainder of the Guadalcanal campaign, and long beyond, becoming a potent symbol of resilience and the ingenious American spirit. It achieved an astonishing record of aerial victories, each one attributed as much to Tony's meticulous craftsmanship and daring modifications as to Morrison's piloting skill. Tony Castellano, though never officially recognized on the same level as the combat pilots, became known almost reverently as a mechanical genius. His unconventional methods of improvisation and enhancement, initially scoffed at, were quietly adopted by other mechanics facing similar shortages and desperate circumstances. The wrench nickname became a badge of honor, whispered among the ground crews. The story of Phoenix was told in briefing rooms, recounted over mess hall dinners, and meticulously written home in letters, inspiring countless others to believe in the impossible. Decades later, in a quiet, climate-controlled aviation museum, a hush fell over the visitors. An elderly historian, his voice soft but resonant, stood before a meticulously restored F4U Corsair. It wasn't the original Phoenix, that particular aircraft having faded into the mists of history, but a sister ship, gleaming under the carefully directed lights. He recounted the legend of Phoenix and the quiet, unassuming mechanic, Tony Castellano, who had refused to accept defeat. He spoke of how a broken machine, deemed worthless, was brought back to life by sheer will and ingenuity, not just as a plane, but as a living symbol of hope and defiance in the darkest hours of a global war. He explained that the story wasn't merely about metal and machines. It was about the indomitable human spirit's refusal to surrender, about the profound bond between a pilot who dared to fly and a mechanic who dared to dream. In the roaring crucible of the Pacific, it wasn't just pilots who flew. It was the mechanics who built the wings of courage, proving that sometimes the spirit of a machine is only as broken as the will of the man who tends it. What legends are waiting to be resurrected in your own life? What seemingly impossible odds are you willing to defy to bring something, or someone, back to life? If this untold story from World War II made you question what's truly possible, and showed you the quiet power of human ingenuity and unwavering devotion, then hit that subscribe button. Join us for more tales that make you reevaluate everything you thought you knew about history and the unsung heroes who shaped it.